First, blocking the Japanese access to the rare earth elements from China over the disputed Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea. Then trade embargoes, starting against the Philippines and Vietnam over the economic exploration in South China Sea, against South Korea for deploying the state-of-the-art US missile system, against Canada for arresting the Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou, against the United Kingdom for supporting pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong, against Norway for giving the Nobel Peace Prize to Liu Xiaobo, a Chinese activist imprisoned for 11 years for raising voice against the human rights violations in China, against Taiwan for refusing to endorse the One China policy, against Australia for its leading role in the COVID-19 investigations, and the list goes on and on, with most recently passing the anti-foreign sanctions law, which allows the Chinese authorities to use countermeasures against foreign governments that harms the Chinese interest. These actions reflect an increasingly visible trend, where China uses sanctions to communicate its unhappiness with other countries, specifically with the United States and its allies. But for how economic weapons are better than military actions for China, we need to first understand a few things. The effectiveness of economic weapons, or rather, for simplicity, let's call these economic tools, lies in the extent to which the sanctioned countries are dependent on. The more the dependency on these economic tools, the greater the harming effect. Example, for the United States, the first tool is access to the US dollar and global capital markets. This is the most powerful tool for economic sanctions in the world because it can cut off the entire international economy for a country. At least in the ideal case. The second tool is the control of the high-tech components, intellectual property rights, which China has been a major target. An important example is the access to the advanced semiconductor technologies, which China has been denied of. What China has is the control of the largest consumer market in the world. For comparison, the Chinese e-commerce market is almost double the US and 7 times the Japan. This shows the Chinese power on the consumer side. On the industrial side, the manufacturing output of China is the largest in the world, greater than the next 6 combined. Most manufacturing components either originate directly from China or are indirectly linked with the Chinese supply chain, making them easily exploitable. These 2 points gives the Chinese government an incredible power to control any foreign government's actions by simply either restricting the exports to the huge Chinese market or hampering the supply chains on which the foreign manufacturers are dependent on. But what's wrong with using force? Well, it's not that China hasn't used force in the past. Rather, it's because the economic method is way easier for China, as we discussed, than using a military force. How? First, using force for political motives often leads to unwanted consequences. For example, in 2014, when the Chinese Coast Guards used water cannons against the Philippines and Vietnam vessels in the South China Sea, it attracted extensive reporting by the international media. In most cases, this leads to regional market instabilities, international boycotts, and reduced confidence in foreign investments in China. And second, the high geopolitical backlash cost. In simple words, using military actions will make other countries seek international help, often with the US military involvement. This forces the Chinese government to instead use gray zone coercion like trade embargoes, which became more effective with the growth of the Chinese economy, affecting even the United States. This is where things get more interesting. For the United States, China is an important market. But note this, in terms of direct exports, the Chinese have a significant advantage compared to the US. The US companies are heavily dependent on the Chinese market because frankly, it's a vast sales multiplier. Like General Motors, a US automobile company sells majority of its cars in China, greater than the US, Brazil, Canada, and Mexico combined. Most iPhone users are from China, and majority of the Apple products are made in China. And likewise, the US economic activity within China through franchisees like the McDonald's and Starbucks is enormous. The real threat of the Chinese sanctions in terms of the US interest is the loss of these huge sales figures from the Chinese market, which otherwise would be half. Please subscribe the channel if you're interested in learning more about geopolitics around energy and its impact on the economy. Please give a thumbs up to this video if it helped you in understanding why economic weapons are more effective than military actions for China.